Hi and welcome to the next lesson of our Middle East topic. Today we're going to diverge from looking specifically at the Middle East, and we're going to look at a resource that you're going to come to learn is very, very important in the region. And that resource is oil. Now we're going to spend this lesson really looking at what oil is, why it's used, and where it is, with the view to then understanding exactly why it's so important for the Middle East. So as usual, the activity is to watch this video right the way through. There may be times where I ask you to pause the video for you to have a little think about some activities. And then at the end, there are 3 review questions. I would like you to answer those 3 questions and upload your answers to show my homework when you are finished. So, we're looking today at something called crude oil. And put simply, oil is a very important source of energy. In fact, it is the world's largest source of energy consumption. So oil is absolutely vital. It is a very, very important energy resource. And the reason it's so important is it's often been described as the lifeblood of industrialized nations. It underpins our modern society. It is used to power industry, to heat our homes, to provide fuel for vehicles and aeroplanes, to carry goods and people all over the world. So when you think about your car running on petrol, petrol is made from oil. And pretty much everything we do in some way relies on this stuff, this crude oil. And it's refined products used to manufacture almost anything chemical. So any plastics, fertilizers, paints, medicines, plus a whole load of kind of items that even when I was researching this lesson, I didn't know that oil even had an impact on them. So oil primarily supplies us energy for industry, heating and vehicles, but it also provides other things as well for other types of manufacturing. So obviously I'm not going to expect the answer to this because it's fairly obvious, but all of those things have oil in common. And it's one of those weird things where you never really think about what is being used to make the products that we use. So what I've done is I've made a list of some examples of what we owe to oil every day of our lives. Now, some of these really surprised me when I went through them. I wonder if you'll have the same reaction. So at school, rulers, crayons, the ink cartridge we use to print paper, glue, the coverings on books, any plastic binders, are all in some way made from oil or refined oil. In our home, contact lenses, any cosmetics and makeup, clothing, fabrics, nail polish, deodorant, shampoo, paint, carpet, washing up liquid, dry cleaning fluid, all at some point involve oil in the process of making those products. Out shopping, all the shopping bags we have, credit cards, plastic milk bottles are all in some way linked to oil. On the move, petrol and diesel for cars and lorries, emergency services and trains. So for example, all the ambulances that run at the moment will all be run by either petrol or diesel, which is made from oil. And then in leisure now, CDs, videos, camera film, bicycle handlebar grips, the tyres we use on our cars, football boots, trainers, shin pads, rollerblades, all those items at some point in their lives will have been manufactured using some form of refined crude oil. So I think it's very obvious that as a resource, it is absolutely vital. I think in the UK, this little image here really shows where a lot of it is used. And you can see that 57% of all the oil in the UK is used on road transport. If oil did not exist right now, most cars would stop, buses, trains, planes. Okay? It would grind to a halt. Our industry, where we are manufacturing products to sell, would stop because it requires oil to be able to function. And then we also have our chemical feedstocks and other, and they're the kind of products I was just talking about. Same example, we have electric cars, but they're not very popular at the moment. But in terms of air travel, there is currently no alternative to using kerosene, which is aeroplane fuel which is derived from oil. So if oil didn't exist, we would not be able to go on holiday on an aeroplane. We would not be able to transport goods and services around the world. So say goodbye to any Amazon packages because they would not be able to be transported here in the same way. So oil, extremely important to our lives. I think if we flick back to this, most of you watching this video will use a minimum, I'd say, of 4 or 5 of the things on that list there, if not a lot more. So oil has a really big part of our life. But the thing with oil is because it's a fossil fuel, now fossil fuel being a fuel that is made in the ground and it can't be reused, being a fossil fuel, it doesn't occur everywhere in the world. So this is a map and it shows the top 20 countries with the most oil reserves. And you'll notice that geographically it is uneven because some parts of the world have quite a fair bit of oil and some parts of the world have very little oil. So I'm going to pause the video here and answer this question, or 2 questions. Which country has the highest oil reserve? And which region has the most oil? So pause the video, 30 seconds, see if you can work it out from that map. Okay, so I've come back with the country with the highest oil reserve, I believe, is Saudi Arabia, which is down here with 264 billion barrels in reserve. I've got Canada over here, which is 178.8 million barrels. And in terms of the region with the most oil, you might go for North America, but over here with Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Iran, UAE, it is the Middle East. And that is going to really feed into our next lesson when we look at how important oil is for the Middle East. Now, the reason why countries in particular are quite fond of oil is because in the past, oil has been called black gold. Now, gold, as we all know, is an incredibly valuable resource, and in history, gold has always been seen as that kind of thing that signified wealth. Oil became known as black gold mainly because of how valuable it is. Now, these figures are just for the UK. Now, tens of thousands of people in the UK work in the oil industry, and it's worth about £37 million a day to the people of Britain. So, us extracting and selling oil is worth about £37 million a day to the people of Britain, which is a huge amount. However, as we looked at in that first map, the UK is not one of the countries which has the largest number of resources. In fact, this organisation called OPEC actually control a vast majority of the world's oil resources. So OPEC stands for the Organisation of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, and it includes places like Saudi Arabia, UAE, Iran, Iraq, includes Nigeria, Angola, Libya, Algeria, etc., etc. Now, these countries group together to try and form a monopoly on oil resources. So by grouping together, they could set the price of oil, they could make the price higher if they wanted to, make the price lower if they wanted to, and it gave them control over the oil market. It also means that these countries gain a huge amount of wealth from the oil in which they hold or which they have. So, here is a slight calculation, and the number at the bottom right is actually nowhere near the real figure. So, on a quick Google, OPEC's proven oil reserves currently stand at 1.1 billion barrels. So 1 billion barrels, which is really hard to get your head around. the average cost of a price of oil is $56 a barrel at the moment. So if you were to calculate very crudely the value of that resource, you would be timesing 1.1 billion times 56. So if we get the number at the bottom right, which is 1.18 billion times 56, that gives us over 66 billion pounds. We can then multiply that bottom right number by a further billion pounds as well, which ends up producing a resource that for OPEC is worth nearly or even over 10 trillion pounds in total, which in terms of a number is absolutely insane. Now, the calculations here are a little bit silly because obviously there's a lot of other costs involved in that. But the point I'm trying to make is that oil is incredibly valuable. It is worth a huge amount of money, and the people that control it can use that money to really help out their respective countries. So, for example, if we're looking at OPEC here, and maybe places like Libya and Algeria or Iraq, which we know might be LICs or poorer countries, they can use that value to really improve their country in the future. And that is going to come into play an awful lot when we look at the Middle East as a region, because oil essentially explains how the Middle East has grown and why conflict occurs in that area. So to finish off today's lesson, there are 3 quick questions. The first question is, why is oil important? This will link right back to the first couple of slides here. We've got, what are the main uses of oil? And why is oil described as black gold? Okay, so for the first one, again, we can flick right back to the beginning of why oil is important. For the second question, it's this middle part of the PowerPoint. And the last question are these final couple of slides. I'd like to answer them as best you can in full sentences, and then once you finish answering them, can you upload your answers to my homework so we can have a little look through them. Any questions, there'll be live Zoom support. But other than that, I hope you now understand exactly how important oil is.